Okay, hello everyone. I cannot be here today, so I decided I was going to make a video for you that I've done with some of my other classes, and I figured this would be a good opportunity to try it out with you. So today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to walk you through the topic, which is the building of the Berlin Wall, which takes place in East Germany during the 1960s Cold War period. So pretty much just follow along with me. I'll give some directions on what we're going to do, and at certain points in the tape I will ask the substitute or Mrs. Krieger to go ahead and stop it so you can do the activities in between. So what we're going to be starting with is you are going to need your notebook out first, and I'll go ahead and give you a moment to get your notebook out, and I'm going to put it up to the first slide, and on the first slide that you'll see you need to copy down the heading into the notebook. It's called Berlin 1945 to 1960. So I'll give you 30 seconds or so. Go ahead and get your notebooks out. And all you need to do right now is copy the heading down. Don't worry about anything else. Okay, now this is what we're going to do. We are going to be talking about the city of Berlin during the Cold War, and the first thing we're going to do is have a flashback of anything at all that we can remember about the city of Berlin from the end of World War II up until now. So what you want to do, you have your heading, it's just called Berlin 1945-1960, and then the question is, what has happened to the city of Berlin, Germany, since the end of World War II in 1945 and 1960? We have talked about this city. This was the capital of Germany during World War II. When the war is over, some things happened to the city, and then there was a couple other events that happened in the late 40s that we did talk about. So what you have here is, if you look below, there is a list of some different words and terms and things that could be used to help form a sentence about what has happened in this city. Now, you don't have to use all the words, but the goal of this is for you to write at least one sentence about what has happened in the city of Berlin following World War II. So what I will do is, as soon as I'm done with the directions, I'll say go ahead and stop it. But take a minute, 2 minutes, to think to yourself, what do we know about this city? And we're not talking about the Berlin Wall yet, because that's going to happen after 1960. And there are some terms there: divided, airlift, Berlin, blockade. So pretty much you can look at those, and you're going to write down at least one sentence in which you can explain something that has happened to the city. So what you can do right now is take that minute, and when you are done, then you are going to, as a class, talk about any of the things that we can remember. So at this point, go ahead and stop the tape, and when everyone is done, go ahead and restart it. Okay, now hopefully you were able to talk a little bit about the city of Berlin. Just some of the things I'll talk to you about before we move on is the city of Berlin was divided at the end of World War II. It was divided into 4 parts. That's why the number 4 is there. It was sorry about that. That was my phone. It was divided into 4 groups. The 4 countries that all had parts of Berlin: Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Now, eventually what happens is that the city is eventually taken from 4 parts down to 2 parts, with the western part of the city becoming known as West Berlin, which was democratic, controlled mostly by the United States and Britain. The eastern part became communist under the control of the Soviet Union. Now, eventually in 1948, the Soviet Union, they tried to stop the United States and Britain from continuing to supply the western part of the city, and that is what we ended up calling the Berlin blockade, where the Soviets did everything they could to keep us from entering into the city. We responded by doing the Berlin airlift, in which we began to fly our supplies over top of the blockade until eventually the Soviets gave up and the blockade was broken. So from 1948 until 1960, we really haven't said too much about Berlin, but it's pretty much a divided city. It's divided into two parts. Now, in 1961, we're going to begin to see one of the major events of the Cold War happen. So at this point, what we're going to do is, I'm going to switch back to FaceTime so you can see me here. Okay, now, the substitute, or Mrs. Krieger, there is a paper here. I don't know if you can see, it's probably backwards on here. It's called the Anticipation Guide, okay? So, Ms. Krieger, the substitute, would you please pass this paper out to them? Now, students, when you get this paper, okay, let me explain it to you, and then you can go ahead and stop it so you can work on it. There are 5 statements at the top of this paper, and these are all true or false questions. So when you look at the paper, what it's asking is, this is all a prior knowledge of the Berlin Wall or what's going to happen here. So read the 5 statements, and then if you think it is a true statement, you're going to put a check mark next to it, and if you think it is a false statement, you're going to put an X next to it. And then Mrs. Krieger or the substitute can review the answers with you, because I provided them with the answers. So go ahead and stop the tape and answer the 5 questions, and then review them before you restart the tape. Okay, now we are back. Now, some of the things to hopefully look at, if you look at your papers, some of the things that were on the Anticipation Guide just to talk about is, one, that the Berlin Wall is built by East Germany. The biggest problem they were having was that many of the West Berliners were trying to, many of the East Berliners were trying to escape into West Berlin. West Berlin was democratic, it was capitalist, they were getting a lot of aid from the United States. East Berlin was communist, very poor, did not have many supplies, they were running out of food, their money was nearly worthless. People were actually burning money because they thought they could just keep printing money and that would help their economy, but actually made it much worse. So the Berlin Wall was built in 1961, and it will stand for 28 years until 1989, and we will, by the end of the year, get to 1989 and talk about the collapse of the Berlin Wall. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to go to the notebook. Okay, there's a couple slides of notes that I'm going to have you copy, and go ahead and you should already have your notebook out anyway. So let's go to the slides, and I will explain to you what needs to be copied as we go through it. So now in the notebook, now the first slide here, you do not have to copy this slide, but the map is, I just kind of want to show you the map so you can see it. By this point, we're roughly in 1960, 1961. Germany, the country, has been divided into 2 parts: Western Germany, which is democratic, capitalistic, and Eastern Germany, which is communist. Now, if you look, there's Berlin. Berlin is, you can see that red dot over here. So this is what we're talking about today, is this city. Now, you can see it's pretty much in the, it's in the near middle of the communist East Germany, but we still, that western part over here, that still belongs to the United States and Britain and France. It's capitalistic, so we're trying everything we can to hang on to this. Now, moving on, you need to begin with this. So this is our title. It's called Conference at Vienna. Vienna is in Austria, everybody. Now, the 2 people in the The 2 people in the picture, you have on the right, John F. Kennedy, who was our president. Now on the left, this is a new political leader for the Soviet Union, which we haven't talked about yet. His name is Nikita Khrushchev, and he'll be pretty important, especially a couple days from now when we talk about Cuba and something that's going on there. Now to start off here, and you need to copy this slide. So I'll give you some time, so since I know I'm not there, it'll be easier. I'll just kind of wait and give you a chance to copy this. Now, so what's happening is the Soviet Union, they are trying desperately to get the United States to back out of West Berlin. If we back out of West Berlin, that leaves West Berlin open to be taken by the communists, and the entire Eastern Germany, the capital city of Berlin, will all become communist. Now, there have been several meetings throughout history. At the end of World War II, there was meetings with Truman, there were meetings with Eisenhower, the Vice President Richard Nixon, and now we have John F. Kennedy. So Kennedy will go to Vienna, Austria to meet with Nikita Khrushchev to talk about the city of Berlin. Now, what's been happening since the end of World War II is that there's an event called the brain drain. East Germans are trying desperately to get out of East Germany and East Berlin because they're communists. They're not having a lot of success. Their economy is weak. The food is scarce. So actually, what was happening prior to the Berlin Wall was that if you lived in East Berlin, you could go from one side of the city to the other side. So East Berliners would go from East Berlin to West Berlin. And once you're in West Berlin, then you could hop an airplane and fly out of West Berlin to West Germany. So you pretty much have escaped communism. And that's what was happening from 1949 to 1961. It's estimated about 3 million East Germans will flee East Germany and East Berlin in order to get to the democratic West Berlin and West Germany. This is what we call the brain drain. Now, it's called that because most of the people that are leaving are young people. So the youth of East Germany and East Berlin, they don't want to live in communism. Okay, they know what capitalism and democracy looks like, and they have relatives living over in West Germany, relatives in West Berlin, and they hear stories about all the things that they have because the United States were pumping in millions and millions and millions of dollars into West Germany, West Berlin, and they think, boy, life would be so much better over in West Germany. So a large group of young people end up fleeing and heading over to West Germany. Now, Nikita Khrushchev, he wants that to stop because it shows a bad picture for East Germany that people don't want to live there. They would rather live in the democratic, capitalistic West Germany and West Berlin. So eventually Khrushchev and Kennedy meet, and Khrushchev pretty much tells Kennedy, we don't want you here anymore. We want the United States to back out. And of course, we refuse to do that. West Berlin is one of our prize cities in Europe. We pretty much transformed them into, much like the United States, they're capitalistic and democratic, and they look a lot like us. So we're not going to do that. So the meeting pretty much is a failure between Kennedy and Khrushchev. Okay, now, listen to me. I'll point out the ones you need to copy. You need to copy almost the entire slide except for the last bullet. So now, what begins happening, okay, the next slide is called The Wall Goes Up. After the meeting in Venice is over, in August of 1961, in a matter of hours, the Berlin Wall begins to be constructed. Now, the Berlin Wall is built around the city of West Berlin. So what the goal is to keep East Berliners and East Germans from getting into West Berlin, because once they get into West Berlin, they can hop a plane and get out. So on August 13th, people in West Berlin, they went to bed with no wall built. In a matter of hours, the East Germans begin to surround the city. It starts off just with barbed wire being wrapped around the city limits, or around the surrounding parts of the city, and then the barbed wire ends up being reinforced, and eventually we get concrete, and we end up getting these huge slabs of concrete that become known as the Berlin Wall. Now, you need to copy the second bullet. Now, what we do, the United States, we don't really do a whole lot. This could have been one of these times where it could have turned into World War III. We are not at the time, and JFK and Congress are not at the time willing to start a war with the Soviet Union over the city of Berlin. Now, what we do is that we do send them $3 billion in order to help put defense in the city of West Berlin. We send more American troops to West Berlin just in case, because we really don't know, are the Soviets preparing to attack West Berlin? But we weren't ready militarily to go into a standoff with the Soviets. So really, we do not respond too much. We don't start fighting a war or anything, but we do send more troops there just in case something else happens where we'll be more prepared to do that. Okay, now, you don't have to copy the last point. The West Berliners, you don't need to copy this. But what I want to kind of talk to you about is there's a quote that comes from JFK. The West Berliners, they were desperately asking for John F. Kennedy to step in here and stop the construction of the Berlin Wall. And a quote from Kennedy says, "We could have sent tanks over and knocked the wall down. What then? They build another one back 100 yards. We knock that down. Then we go to war. So he knows in the back of his mind that this is definitely a possible war starting issue, and he wants to avoid war right now with the Soviets. Technology-wise, we had better technology than the Soviets, but by this point, they have the hydrogen bomb. We have the hydrogen bomb. They have long-range missiles. We have long-range missiles. So they have technology that's comparable to ours. So at any moment, if a war broke out, missiles and rockets in the sky that are nuclear warheads attached to them and could strike any city in the United States, we could strike any city in the Soviet Union. So we're trying to avoid that. Now we're going to show you a couple pictures here. So this is the construction of the Berlin Wall. If you look, one side here, okay, the side over here on the mouse, so the right side, this is the West Berlin side, and over here is East Berlin. So what you actually see is they are constructing the wall, and if you look in the background, you see this, it's like a near fencing. There's barbed wire across the top, there's fencing here, and this eventually will get reinforced with concrete. That's what happens in a matter of a night. They end up building this fence barbed wire kind of divider, but eventually they start reinforcing with these concrete blocks and concrete slabs. And you can see the West Berliners over here, they wake up, they really have no idea what's going on here. And the East Berliners, the communists, they're being directed to do that. The wall, most places was between 8 to 12 feet. Some places got as high as 15 feet. And over here you see another image of the Berlin Wall. Down in the left and up here in the right. So you can see in between here they actually had two different fences at certain points so that the East German communists could patrol in between the fences to make sure that nobody's trying to escape. And there are a lot of people that try to escape, and you'll see this in this video that we're about ready to watch. Okay, so for right now, okay, the notebook you're going to keep out, we're going to need it in a little bit, but we're going to switch it over and I'm going to put a video on. The video is called Overcoming the Berlin Wall, and it just explains to you some of the things happening here. Okay, so watch it, and then when we're done, we have a couple other things, and then we'll pretty much be finishing up then.
Capital of the Federal Republic of Germany, is a modern unified city today. But less than a generation ago, it was divided both physically and politically. The Berlin Wall, a massive concrete barrier with barbed wire, split the city into Democratic West and Communist East Berlin. The wall was an ugly symbol of the Cold War between Communist Eastern Europe, led by the former Soviet Union, and the capitalist democracies of the West, led by the United States. The people of Berlin were caught in the middle of this struggle between superpowers. The origins of the Berlin Wall can be traced to World War II and the tense post-war period that followed. The victorious Allies divided Germany. The American, British, and French zones became the democratic nation of West Germany. The Soviet zone became the communist country of East Germany. Even though it was about 100 miles inside East Germany, the former capital city of Berlin was also divided. The sector occupied by the Soviets was East Berlin. The sectors occupied by the Americans, British, and French were West Berlin. After the war, the U.S. rushed money and other resources to West Germany to support it against communist Eastern Europe. But rather than sending aid to East Germany, the Soviets demanded that the East Germans pay them back for the losses they incurred during the war. As a result, the East German economy stagnated under communist rule. Meanwhile, West Germany rebuilt its cities and factories. By the 1950s, West Berlin was a showcase for West German prosperity. A democratic island of economic success inside impoverished East Germany. For discontented East Germans, West Berlin offered the promise of freedom and prosperity. As a result, increasing numbers of East Berliners fled to West Berlin. Between 1945 and 1961, About 4 million East Germans left for the West. This was a great embarrassment to East Germany's communist government. Even worse, the loss of large numbers of skilled workers and professionals was a serious threat to East Germany's already floundering economy. At last, in August 1961, the frustrated East German government built the Berlin Wall, cutting off East Berlin from the West. The wall was 15 feet high in some places and topped with barbed wire. Soldiers with machine guns atop the wall and landmines scattered around its perimeter further ensured that no one got across. Over the years, the East Germans fortified and expanded the barrier, adding electrified fences and anti-vehicle traps. In time, the wall extended 28 miles and totally divided East and West Berlin, separating families, neighborhoods, and loved ones. The wall achieved its intended goal. It stopped the flood of people to West Berlin. But it also became an embarrassment for the Soviets, who touted East Germany as a communist paradise. Instead, East Germany earned an image as a nation whose citizens had to be forcibly restrained from fleeing. Over the years, about 5,000 East Germans managed to go over, under, or through the Berlin Wall into West Berlin. But 5,000 others were captured and imprisoned, and about 200 were killed while trying to escape. The beginning of the end for the Berlin Wall came in 19...
Okay, now, it's just some of the things about the video they mentioned, or some of the things that you saw. The Berlin Wall, all around it, they had military posts. And really what they did was, there were 5,000 people that 5,000 people that did escape. There were 5,000 people that were captured in the process of trying to escape. They had walls built, and around the walls they would put sand in front of the walls. They would put booby traps. They'd put landmines so that if somebody was trying to escape and run across in order to get across the wall, they would be shot on sight. So they had a lot of things to keep people from entering and trying to get across the Berlin Wall. Sometimes people went as far as even trying to drive vehicles through the Berlin Wall. So they set up different types of obstacles to keep them from doing that. Now, the Berlin Wall will be a topic we'll address because eventually not a whole lot happens with it between 1961 until we get to 1989 when eventually the wall comes down. One thing I'd like to mention to you here, and this is the last thing that we're going to copy notes-wise for the notebook. So this is, you do need to copy this. There are, I think, two points on here. Eventually, about a little less than 2 years after the Berlin Wall is constructed, John F. Kennedy will travel to West Berlin. And the main reason he's going there is he wants to tell the people of West Berlin that we, the United States, are here to support them. And we are supporting them. Militarily, we're making sure that the Soviets are not doing anything to threaten invasion, but also economically, we're giving them millions of dollars to help keep them afloat, because at this point, they're pretty much being strangled. The Berlin Wall is preventing West Berlin from having a prosperous economy, or that's what the Soviets are hoping for. But because we keep feeding them millions of dollars, millions of American capitalist dollars, West Berlin still continues to shine as a capitalist city within the communist East Germany and East Berlin. So eventually when John F. Kennedy goes to West Berlin, he makes a speech in front of a huge crowd of West Berliners, and they're all chanting his name, Kennedy, Kennedy. Now most of them couldn't speak English, but they had translators there for the speech. Now, you do not need to copy the second bullet, but you do need to copy the last bullet, so bullets 1 and bullet 3. During the speech that JFK was making to the people, he makes a statement of Ich bin ein Berliner, and what we will say today is that he says, or he means to say, that I am a Berliner, meaning he's trying to show these West Berliners that the United States is here to support them. Now, kind of one of the historical screw-ups, I guess, is most most historians say that when he actually pronounced it, he mispronounced Ich bin ein Berliner, and he actually ended up saying that he was a jelly donut, which I know that sounds funny, but the thing, it doesn't really matter. The people of West Berlin, like I said, they're just pumped that the president is there. So really, from this point on, 1963, we won't really get back to Berlin again until we get into the 1980s. Okay, so that's kind of the summary of what happens here with the Berlin Wall. Now, what I want you to do last, and I'm not sure how much time you have in class, so this will take you about 10 minutes. So if you have about that time, you can get started with it, or even if you don't, you can still get started. Now, what I want you to do is, I'm going to go back here to the previous slide, and you're going to copy this down. It's called Effects of the Wall. Okay, you don't need a copy of the bullet, you just need a copy of Effects of the Wall. Okay, now I'm going to switch back to the camera because I just want to show you something, and then I'll explain this last part to you. Now, what I want you to do is, I have a couple handouts, and this you can do in a small group with people around you. But there are different maps of Sunbury, and I know this is backwards, but you can kind of get the idea. Now, what I did on the map is I went through the city of Sunbury, and I drew different dividers, because the point is, the Berlin Wall, yes, it is a wall, but you need to kind of get an understanding of what effect did this wall have on the two cities of East Berlin and West Berlin. Because before the wall, people could travel back and forth. So you might have a family member on one side and your other family on the other side, and all of a sudden the wall is built. So you're going to get a map, and then in a group, what I want you to do is think about the city of Sunbury. And based on the map that you have, think about how the wall is going to change the lives of people. So like here you have a map that pretty much there's a wall built around a certain part of Sunbury. So what effects is this going to have on them? You can think about a lot of different things. You can think about social effects, family, job, school, access to services, grocery stores. Okay, so I'm going to kind of let that go there. So if the substitute or Mrs. Krieger, if you could pass the maps out and pretty much use the time you have left to brainstorm on how a wall in a community could affect it, more than just saying, well, I woke up and there was a wall outside my door, but what's kind of the longer lasting. Remember, the wall stands for 28 years. So for 28 years, people are divided and they have no access to each other. Okay, so at this point, I can pass out the maps to you, and you can stop the video because I'm done with what I need to talk to you about. So just use the time left to talk about the effects, and you also need to write them down. Okay, so try to get a short list of some of the effects that you think may have occurred because of the Berlin Wall, and I will be back tomorrow on Thursday, and we will be traveling back to the country of Cuba. Alright, so I hope everything went alright, and I will see you tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can hold them till tomorrow if we're not able to answer them in class, and I will answer them when I get back. Okay, thank you. Have a great day, everybody. See ya.